Hey everybody, welcome and hello, Raintree, anybody else in the chat. Glad to have all you guys here. Uh yeah, things are going it's been an interesting morning for me. My wife like
My wife.
my wife she
Still never seen the movies. Still funny.
hey, you're okay. You don't you don't need to. It's all right.
No, I appreciate Sacha Baron Cohen. Those movies are just not my humor style.
No. So my wife this morning, she
My
had
wife.
a rental at the church at 6:30 in the morning.
Yeah, I saw the parking lot was pretty full when I drove by this morning.
Yeah. At 6:31 I hear and I wake up
Oh
and I look over at my
no.
wife and I'm like, "What's wrong?" She goes, "It's 6:30. My rental's
Oh
right now."
no.
And she like leaps out of bed. And so I wake up at 6:40, so 10 like it's 10 minutes earlier than I expect, and so it's like this rude awakening for me, and which also means that I need to get the kids ready for the day and get them to school, like all kinds of stuff. I usually split with her, and so it's been kind of a wild morning. But that, and I got a migraine. You can see I'm wearing my blue light glasses to try and reduce that stuff. Yeah. So anyway, Fox, how you doing, man? What's going on with you?
It's been a pretty normal morning. Pretty casual, you know?
Nice.
Just pretty standard. I woke up on time and had a good breakfast. And yeah, it's been pretty okay.
You know what I've been doing a lot recently? Is
Drugs.
so much. Well, I mean, technically, yes, I have a daily medication that I take. I do every single day.
Drugs for
Yes.
your health.
Uh,
What else would I be talking about?
but I have been making ramen, but then taking whatever meat is like it is supposed to be, so like chicken ramen, and we have leftover chicken in the fridge, and I actually fry up that chicken and I put in some like frozen veggies, and then I put that in with the ramen. It's real good, man. It's
No,
good stuff.
I ate a lot of ramen growing up.
Food,
you know, top ramen packets.
Yeah.
And it'd just be the seasoning packet and the noodles, boiled in water and mixed. And then I eventually learned, like ramen, as in the dish from Japan, is what you described.
Yeah.
It's noodles with some kind of protein and veggies, protein maybe, but like It's not just noodles, flavored noodles. It can be, I guess, but like,
Fubadu says ramen's pretty close to drugs. Kyle's doing lines of seasoning packets off of the coffee table.
yeah, like I said, a normal morning. Come on.
Raintree says Fantasy Costco, the place where fantasy racism happens in the parking lot between a Mexican wizard and a white priest. I introduced DJ Raintree to the Adventure Zone this past weekend, and
he introduced him to Worlds Beyond Number, the even better one.
No, I mean the board game. Adventure Zone, the board game. Yeah. And it was kind of a hit at, we had like a weekend with a bunch of volunteers from the camp, middle school camp. Nice. And and it was kind of a hit. So we played it a couple of times and it was super fun. So
I remember enjoying that when we played it.
Dude, every time I play it, I end up like with a sore throat from laughing so much or whatever. It's great, man. So yeah, Raintree, it's a hit for sure. Okay, before we get started, you guys might be buying it. Oh yeah, I love it, man. The tough part with it is it's not one that you can just bust out and play at home, no problem. You know what I mean? Like most games, you can be like, let's just do a quick family night.
I guess a party
game. Yeah, it's mostly a party game. So anyway, okay. Question for the day that I want to just kind of toss back and forth to you guys here in the chat and here with you, Fox, before we actually get started on the podcast, is the question of remakes. So, Resident Evil 4 just dropped, and it's spectacular. It's a really, really good game. It's getting great reviews. But the original Resident Evil 4 was also spectacular. It was this wonderful game that was made revolutionary for its time, a 10 out of a 10 game for its time. So my question to you guys is, with all of these remakes coming out, should these games be rated on their own, or do you think that like it should be taken into account that this has already been made? Like it's a remake of what at the time was a perfect game. So does that make it a little bit easier on them? So I don't know. What do you guys think in the chat, Fox? What do you think?
I don't know. I've long stated in our podcast that I am of the opinion that in like awards competitions, which are inherently just mean, like not really any kind of objectivity, obviously. So it
Remake
doesn't really.
Raintree, specifically remakes Raintree. Go ahead, Fox.
Yeah,
Sorry.
at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It's just, the Game Awards are not some kind of handed down from on high kind of thing. Jeff Keighley isn't that great.
You hear
but-
like angelic voices, and he descends from the clouds with a game award in his hand.
This is from me and my best friend Hideo Kojima. We're friends.
We're friends.
Remember that. We're
Just so
friends.
you know.
He and I are friends. I was in one of his games. No, I am the opinion that a remake should be disqualified from any kind of like game of the year, something like that, because it inherently has a boost up. They wouldn't have remade it if it wasn't already beloved. Generally, games that aren't considered very good aren't given the remake treatment for the most part, I guess. Maybe a remaster if there's a cult following or something. But so I do think it's kind of tipping the scales a little bit. Now, I can recognize that these Resident Evil remakes, 2 through 4 specifically, are significantly different.
I will
As in,
say
like,
2 and 3 are significantly different.
I'm saying in presentation, in style, like obviously, yeah, I haven't played 4. 2 and 3 I have played. 4 I haven't played. Either the old one or the new one. But it does seem to me like there is still maybe 4 is similar. But okay, well, I guess in general I'll say that if a remake, and again this is subjective, if a remake does significantly not improve, just shift the style or whatever if it kind of iterates on something rather than just updating it, I think that might be okay. That might be like maybe allows it to be considered something different, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah, Raintree says the remake of the first 2 Tony Hawk games. It's the same game with great graphics and smoother controls. Like, and I feel like that is an easy leg up. Where here, hey, remember this game you love? We made it easier to play and looking better. Here it is,
Now, you're right. Mostly, it did add a few mechanics from 3 and 4.
Right.
A few things like I think like the what is it, the revert, I think is called,
right?
So you can continue combos after you come off a quarter pipe. But yes, it is basically the same thing.
I agree where that in itself is different than the God of War reboots, where they're not remakes, they're sequels, but they are entirely different in gameplay and in stylisticness and whatever else, especially even in narrative, where the original God of War games were these Greek tragedies. And it was the classic, if you idolize this character, then you don't understand this character. With Kratos, you don't understand that he is the tragedy of this.
He is
series.
The tragedy. He deserves what he is getting.
Right.
But you still understand him, and so therefore he can still be a tragic figure. Honestly, it's a kind of obscure movie, but for me a big example of this would be a movie remake called Suspiria, which is a remake from a couple of years ago of
my name's Fox. I go to international film festivals. I know Suspiria, the original and the remake.
That is what I was about to say. So I got nothing else. No, it's a remake of a movie from like 50 years ago, and it significantly changes the context of the film while taking core elements to be the same. Like, it makes it not just a cash grab, where it doesn't feel like that was popular, let's do it again. It takes some weird, obscure thing and changes it to the degree that it would make sense for a modern audience, but also respects and like upholds what the original kind of was saying to a certain extent. And I really like when remakes do that, because I think there are certain video games, certain whatevers that when they came out had a great message, had a great thing to say, and it can be said again with a recontextualization that justifies using that same story or that same core concept. I really wish The Warriors would be remade, because I think that's similar, where it had an idea, had something to say, and it was, it's kind of a cult classic and it's not a perfect movie, but it was really good at the time, and I think they could do that again.
Let's be clear, The Warriors is not kind of a cult classic. It is absolutely a cult classic, and it was a fine movie for its time, but it was a lot more than people realized.
Yes. Yeah, and you would not have, if you've seen John Wick 4, half of that movie is a huge homage to The Warriors.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, that makes sense. As you say it, I'm like, oh, of course, it's one guy who's being hunted by everybody else, and okay.
He's racing across Paris to get to a certain point, and then throughout that whole section, a good half an hour to 45-minute section, you have a radio DJ who you only see the mouth and the microphone giving cryptic updates to the people of Paris on where.
Oh, that's awesome!
Where John Wick is.
That's very cool.
She even plays the same first song that the DJ in the Warriors.
Oh, so it's like direct homage.
It's not trying to hide.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's cool.
And it was so good. It was a great movie overall, but that was so good.
So
anyway.
Speaking of us knowing things like The Warriors and you knowing things like Suspiria, I did want to let you know that you'd be proud of me. Raintree knows what I'm talking about here. This past weekend, again, we had this retreat of counselors all getting together, having a good time. And the people who directed it had some games and stuff prepared for us, including Jeopardy! A Jeopardy competition that we split into 3 different teams. And the topics were movies and TV, animals, music, food, and video games.
Okay.
So these are the 5 subjects, right? Kind of spreading throughout.
Yeah, kind of pop culture, animals, and food. Sure.
So yeah, just kind of like generally spread out here. I actually leaned over to my team and I'm like, hey, do you know much about food and animals? Because I think I got everything else here.
You guys cover that stuff. Don't even talk to me about the rest.
Well, it was not easy. They were like some challenging questions here.
Good.
And because of the challenging questions, there were 3 teams. The team who was in last place got negative 1,100 points.
Wow.
Negative 1,100 points.
Okay.
The team who was in second place got negative 800 points. And
Billy.
The team who was in first place was at positive 1,900 points.
Wow.
And that was my team.
Quite the spread.
And let's just say that people were a little bit genuinely angry with me.
That sounds very frustrating.
Like 40% genuinely angry with me. And for whatever, this was the one that did it for so many people. The question was, how many legs does a lobster have? Do you know the answer to that question?
How many legs does a lobster have?
Yeah.
I'm going to say 6.
The answer's 10.
Oh, okay.
I knew this. And so I buzzed in and I'm like, it's 10. And people looked at me like, why do you know that?
Why are you so casual
and
about that?
I admittedly, I did a dumb thing and I just look at him, I go, it's a decapod. And that did it. Like people flipped.
I want to punch you through this.
People flipped.
Obviously, it's a decapod, you rubes.
I mean, it was, but I felt pretty good. It was fun.
Oh yeah, no,
I had a great time.
Inward, you were having a wonderful time.
It was wonderful. I did feel a little bit bad in of other things because there was questions like, what 3 movies were blockbuster hits for Jim Carrey in 1994? So in 1994, Jim Carrey had 3 blockbuster hits. What were they?
Ace Ventura. The Mask, and oh man, I can't remember.
That's exactly what I did. I got that far and I was like, dang it, I don't remember the other one. And then somebody else buzzed in and they're like, Liar Liar, Ace Ventura, and Dumb and Dumber. And I knew it wasn't Liar Liar. Liar Liar was like 2000. But that was it for me. I was like, oh, that's the 3rd one. And I buzzed in and I got it right. It was the same thing of somebody. It was like, what Michael Jackson album had 5 #1 singles? And I'm like, it's
obviously Thriller.
Incorrect, my friend. No? Incorrect. I said, in my brain, I said, it is either Thriller or bad. It's
Oh,
one of those
bad.
two. I don't know which one. Somebody else buzzed in and said thriller, and I was like, and got it wrong, and I was like, yes, Buzz, it's bad.
Here's,
Like I
here's
remember.
what we need to do. This is basic. You and I, because I get this way too in trivia competitions. We need to get into competitive bar trivia.
You and I.
Yes.
Okay.
Where it is perfectly acceptable to have this obscure knowledge and nobody's going to get upset about you knowing it. You
Right.
might
Right.
get
Because
upset
why
a
you're
lot.
there.
And it'll basically be the equivalent of like somebody who's a werewolf and you lock them in a room for you don't try to cure it, you just lock them in a room for the full moon and they can just get that out of their system. Or like they go run through the woods where they're not going to hurt anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Raintree says, to be fair, all of this was after he was dominating like the entire game. So I guess like people's like frustration and annoyance level was building.
It's gonna level up.
Was like
Yeah,
building,
absolutely.
building, and then I said it's a decapod, and that's what like was the straw that broke the
I
camel's back.
expect you to know about movies and video games, and then you come in and casually mention decapods. That's just they're upset that you're not staying in your lane.
Yes,
Steve.
stay in your lane, nerd.
Stay in your nerd
Wrong
lane,
kind of nerd.
freaking dork. You know what? We're all collectively gonna give you a wedgie after this. Stay in your lane.
Oh man. All right. Hey everybody. Thanks for chatting with us this morning. We're about to start into our actual podcast here, which reminds me I should probably record this. If you guys don't know, The Nerdy Gritty is a podcast. You can go listen to this podcast on our YouTube channel, the Save Point Ministries YouTube channel. Eventually, if you guys are enjoying this, we actually have an RSS feed of The Nerdy Gritty that is set and ready to go. But we are just currently not in a place where we can afford the monthly payment for the RSS feed. If you enjoy the Nerdy Gritty, it would be wonderful if you go to SavePointMinistries.com, go to Give, set a monthly payment. Our RSS feed is $16 a month. So if you were to give like $5 a month and 3 of you were to do that, it would take care of it. In which case, then we could start putting this out and you could just get this podcast in your feed every single or every other week as we release them.
Yeah.
And you would get access to all of our old ones. We have years of podcasts from before
Hundreds
that
of
as well.
episodes.
Yeah, hundreds of episodes. So with that being said, though, as we are recording the podcast, we will not really be interacting with chat because this is something to listen to later. The only exception we make to that is first-time chatters and raids. If somebody raids, we just like to say, hey, welcome in, and let them know what's going on here. With that being said, though, we're going to be talking about fantasy racism and kind of what's going on in that area these days, and we'll be talking about, well, we'll get into it. Sorry, so now I can only do one thing at a time here. I'm checking my audio levels. All right, cool. I sound good. So, I'll say put in your thoughts. As we're talking, put in your thoughts and your responses, and we will get to them after the podcast. We come back later and we hit all these questions or all these comments that you guys have during the podcast, and we do talk over them, just not right in the moment. So know that if you are listening and you put in your thoughts, we will get to them, just not immediately. All right, that being said, Fox, are you ready to record a podcast?
I absolutely am.
I think you have the pre-intro today, my friend.
Sure, sounds great.
All right, I'm recording.
Same.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1,
2,
3.
4.
That was weird. You said 1, and that's not.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Yeah.
Impulse.
Go ahead.
Today on the Nerdy Gritty, what is fantasy racism and why should we be concerned?
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Nerdy Gritty, where we delve deep into the details of pop culture. I am Dez, but this time I have been race swapped to Asian.
Cool.
Yeah.
That sounds inherently better. I am your bard your white
You'll get there.
supremacist fox.
What? No, okay. Hey, cut that. Just that.
Fantasy white supremacist fox.
Nope, too late. Cut that audio. Put that out into the world. Let's get Fox canceled now.
I can never run for office now. In fact, my wife, who is going to be a lawyer and potentially could run for something, Sorry,
Yeah,
Henry.
it's done. It's over
Never.
now. You
It
just
is
ruined
over.
this for
I
her.
ruined everything. I'm so sorry.
But the good news is that nobody should take you seriously on that because April Fools, right?
Yeah, that's the whole thing. It was a big joke.
All this April
You're all
Fools
April
stuff.
Fools if you believed me.
That's right. That's right. Speaking of which, April Fool's was recently, and as every year, there were plenty of wonderful, hilarious April Fool's jokes from the world of nerddom. So we
There
thought
were some attempts also.
yeah, some
Some
attempts.
attempts. Yeah.
We thought we would jump in and talk about some of our favorite April Fool's nerddom events that happened this past week, and just chat about what we enjoyed about them. So, Fox, I'm going to let you go first, my friend. What April Fools did you appreciate?
Well, here's the problem: is that a lot of like the April Fool's stuff has become serious enough where the April Fools for like Among Us isn't really a joke.
Right.
It's like an actual thing that they put in their game for a day or two.
Most of them
So
were
it's-
like that, yeah.
Yeah, they're not just like tweeting about we're putting horses in our game. They actually put horse mode in the game and then and it's a funny thing for a day. So I mean, technically, yeah, it's like just a funny joke for the day, but it's not a fool. It's not like a
You're not fooling anybody because you're being
fooling anybody, you're
serious.
just doing it. So here's why, or that's why this one is my favorite, and it would be what Street Fighter 6 put out, what Capcom put for Street Fighter 6.
I love this. Go ahead.
It's so good. Man, I've been watching all the Street Fighter. I've never gotten into fighting games really, or for a long time, but I continually watch them and always want to try them. So anyway, Street Fighter 6, they put out. They've been talking about all these new game modes they're trying out and ways of playing and actually like controller setups and stuff, and they're including the cat battler.
You can fight. You can 1v1 your cat.
You can 1v1 your cat. Essentially, it's a wonderful, like, just joyous video of one of the developers of the game. They 3D
so
printed.
Boku-chan. As the cat just
Basically,
walks away. I love it.
3D printed like an attachment to put on a controller that then connects to this cat toy. It's just a little thing on a string, but when the cat pulls the string, it manipulates these arms that presses buttons on a controller, meaning they can now play Street Fighter.
It's
You can now-
wonderful.
It's so funny.
And the best part is it's a real thing. Like he
Well,
actually 3D printed this and put this
They
whole
actually
thing
made it
together.
into- yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You obviously cannot actually purchase this. It's not a
No.
real thing.
I
But
bet
yes,
you that 3D print is online somewhere though.
Oh, I'm sure. Somebody else can make it for sure. And now it's gonna be a part of Evo, the Evo tournament next year.
Oh my
Is
gosh.
Cat versus cat Street Fighter.
Oh, I want exactly that to happen. I would watch that, Fox. I would watch like single elimination like bracket tournaments of cat
Yeah.
versus cat.
Super low health, so the matches go pretty quick.
Right. I would watch the crap out
But
of
yeah,
that.
now let's make it real. Let's do it. The winner gets $500,000 worth of cat food.
Of cat food. Well, Fox, something that is true about both you and I is that we have facial hair. And as gamers, we are
Accurate.
also familiar with the Razer brand of
Sure.
computer accessories,
Gamer
etc.
gear.
Gamer gear, right. But here's the thing. The Razer brand has always been computer gear. It's never been a Razer.
Which doesn't make any sense.
Except for now, the good news is they're coming out with the Razer Razor. So this is
Okay.
this
sure.
is a mouse that is also a razor.
Oh, it's a mouse? I saw a headline about this. I didn't know that.
So it's a mouse with scroll wheel, buttons, and everything, but the underside is like the electric razor type thing. And so the idea is that you feel sharp, play sharp is the tagline to this.
Pretty good.
Yeah. And you're manipulating your thing, and then like, oh, look at myself in the camera. Oh no, hang on. There we go. Oh, much better.
That way you can game more because you don't have to leave to shave.
Right,
You don't have
right.
to leave your stream to shave.
All we
This
need
is
now,
brilliant.
all we need now is the secret lab toilet chair, and
Yes, that would be excellent. Really, yeah. Just what? How can I not leave my setup at all?
oh man. So yeah, that I mean, It was hilarious. I kind of wish that was real. Like something like the more that people encourage you to never leave your desk for any reason, like the edible microphone or something like that. So, all right, what else you got? What's your what
I
is
mean,
another good April
there's
Fool's?
there's a whole lot of just like look at this funny yeah, Among Us did the whole horse universe or horse mode.
We haven't gotten
Now
to my
there's
favorite yet.
now there's horse wrangling mode. It's hide and seek, but the seeker takes the role of a rancher, literally tying up horse mates instead of killing them.
There you go. There you
That
go.
one's pretty good. In Genshin Impact, you quote unquote you can play as a cat. Now a lot of cat based.
Yeah, a lot of cat-based humor.
People like the cats.
My favorite one is that Nintendo Switch. There was a very brief Nintendo Direct
Yeah,
in which they announced a new mode that you can play classic games. And this is, I think it was Miyamoto, if I remember the video correctly. I think it was Miyamoto
Sure.
himself
yeah. Miyamoto
announcing
himself.
into the camera that the best voices for all of these classic games are now accessible. That through Nintendo Switch Online, you can change the voice audio of any classic Nintendo game to the voices from the Mario Brothers movie. They actually say in there, Chris Pratt, you can now have Chris Pratt's voiceovers. Nobody could voice Mario better.
Charles Martinet had to be watch that and said, "It's a joke. It's a
It's
joke.
just
Charles. It's a
he's
joke.
just
It's a joke.
joking. It's
Stop.
not that big of a
Stop.
deal."
Stop. It's a joke."
And there are people out there who watched it and knew it was a joke and didn't care. They're like, "I'll kill you!"
You're right. Oh, for every April Fool's joke, somebody misses the whoosh over the head
right.
and gets upset about it.
My favorite part is
Cough, Jordan Peterson.
as it goes through, it's like they're showing the character from the game and they're getting a clip from the movie. So it's Mario and the original Mario running along, and the video says, and Chris Pratt as Mario, and you hear Mushroom Kingdom, here we come, and as he goes off to the area, and it continues with each character, and then it gets to Toad, and it's like, and you can get the classic Toad audio from Keegan-Michael Key, and it's Toad from like Toad Tracker or Toad Adventure, whatever it's called.
Yeah,
And he
Toad
turns to the camera, and you just hear, "You done messed up, Ron."
That's so good.
And then it's Bowser, and I don't even know what it's quoting, but it's Jack Black like bleeped out every like 3 words because he's cursing at whatever it is, and it's just
That would make the Mario movie way better.
oh my gosh, it was hilarious. That was my favorite April Fool's thing.
Yeah, that was from IGN specifically. IGN put that up on. Or was it? I only saw it on IGN, so I assumed it was IGN making a joke and making it look like a Nintendo Direct. But was it? Was it from Nintendo?
Hang on, I don't know, man. Surprise!
That
Nintendo
doesn't-
Direct reveals more. Yeah, I think this was a real, like, again, a joke Nintendo Direct, but I'm
Sure. Anyway, it's funny either way.
yeah, it was hilarious.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, well, guys, those are our favorites. It's Tenacious D song. One of our
Oh, that
listeners
makes
says, yeah.
That makes sense.
So, what were your guys' favorite April Fool's jokes? Let us know. There were a lot of really good ones, like in League of Legends, you can now wear as many hats as you wanted. Get these huge
good.
stack of hats. In Baldur's Gate 3, they were talking about, we know how much you guys like to cheese encounters, so now you can have cheese heads. There's just all kinds of like cheese
Good
themed
one,
things.
yeah.
So
That's funny.
yeah, it's good stuff. Anyway, Fox, hey, what's going on in the world of news,
When
my
will
friend?
Blizzard prank everybody by saying that they're gonna treat their employees well?
Oh,
That should have been their
Now-
April Fool's.
now I'm sad.
Hey, you know how we like to talk about how people are selling old games, or we talked about Funko a few episodes back,
Yeah.
just dumping a whole bunch of crap into a
Yeah.
landfill. Well, not all Funko Pops are worthless, it turns out. Let me give you a few details here
Oh,
on
no.
a recent trade
Oh no.
of Funko Pops. So let's see. Most Funko Pop. I'm reading from a Kotaku article here. One recent trade. Yes. Okay. So there is a Funko Pop called a Freddy Funko Venom, or called a Frenum. So it's Funko's like mascot, Freddy Funko, but he's got like a Venom suit on They only made 20.
Oh.
They only made 24 of these Funko Pops.
Oh, wow.
So they're extremely rare. And there's a guy out there, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. Junot Ignacio. He made it his goal to try to collect all 24 of those, to hoard them all, which made a lot of people not happy with him in the collectors
Of course.
community. But at one point, apparently, he got up to like 18. And so apparently, he's been actually getting rid of them. He owns a like a limousine service, so he's been looking to trade them for luxury cars. Recently, he traded 6 of these Funko Pops for 2 $80,000 Cadillac Escalades.
What?
6 Funko Pops, very rare Funko Pops, to be clear, very, 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 scarce, for 2 2023 Cadillac Escalades, totaling about $160,000 in value.
For me, this is one of those things where I'm never going to have either of those things. So it's just kind of like this weird rich people doing rich people things.
Sure.
Like, I don't know. It's the equivalent of people saying like, oh, I traded my Tesla for a small airplane or whatever.
Yeah.
And I get that Funkos are one of these things, and that's weird. That's weird. But if that's what you want, that's still weird. I don't know, man.
It is, man. It is. Yeah. It's like, I can understand somebody wanting the 2 Cadillac Escalades, especially since this person has a limousine service.
Yeah.
Where assuming that those will be part of that service, and he, now has 2 new cards for his fleet or whatever. That the other person is really, really banking on the hope that these Funkos retain their value in the community.
Or for all you know, this person has 10 Cadillac Escalades.
Fair enough.
Like
Yeah.
Arnold
No.
Schwarzenegger apparently has several Hummers, like depending on what he's wearing that
man.
day or whatever. Like Jay Leno's got his entire car collection. Like,
Sure, there are car collectors. That's true.
maybe this
but you
dude just
still-
like, hey, I never drive those 2 Escalades. I always drive these other 7. He can have those 2, sure.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's absolutely true. Yeah, it gets to a certain point where it's just kind of fun, if you are a Magic collector.
Fun.
Well, if you collect, Magic the Gathering, and you have lots of rare cards,
Yeah.
you're looking, if you want to create a certain deck and are looking for certain cards, those cards will be more valuable than the ones you already have if you're not using them. Things like that. Like, to be fair, like, it's collectors do it for different reasons. Some people do it for the value, some people do it for the fun. I think both. In the picture that this guy posted on Instagram, it's him and the assumedly the person he's trading with in front of these 2 Cadillacs, and then it looks like it's at a Cadillac dealership. So I don't know if that's just like neutral ground that they met to do this in-person deal, or if it's, the owner of a Cadillac dealership or something.
Neutral ground.
Neutral ground.
Cadillac dealership. You know how it works.
Dealership.
Nothing can happen there.
Yeah, we all know that nobody ever targets. So anyway, it is one of those things. Like, yeah, I think you hit it, where it's just like, this is so far outside of the realm of possibility for me. That's just like, okay,
weird.
I don't get why. I get why you'd want 2 Cadillacs, I suppose. I don't get why you'd want 6 of the same Funko Pop. Are you gonna put them on a shelf and look at them and then say, I wish I could drive somewhere now?
I wonder if he's going to take 5 of them and trade them for 2 other Cadillac Escalades. Like, haha, I snuck a Funko Pop from you, sucker.
Got him. Yeah, it's such a interesting, like, I always think of it as just the new version of Beanie Babies, and it's just like, did somebody trade Beanie Babies for a whatever, I trade these Beanie Babies for my new Bugatti the other day.
Probably, which is wild.
Wonderful.
Speaking of rich people doing rich people things, hey, Monster Energy drink?
I know of it, yes.
You know how they're the worst?
Sure, I guess.
Did you know, I'm sure you heard about this, whether you knew this was directly the reality or just heard kind of in the peripheral, that there was a Ubisoft game that we know now that it's called Phoenix Rising, that it was going to be called Gods and Monsters. Have you heard of
Oh
this?
yeah, Immortals Phoenix Rising.
Right.
Yeah, I played
And
a little bit of it.
but now it's just Phoenix Rising because Monster Energy Drink came in and said that their use of the word monster could get people confused with their brand and
What?
this video game, that this video game might be representing their brand, and people might get confused with that.
Wait, so did they actually sue them, or was it like,
Oh yeah.
hey, oh wow.
Yeah.
And-
This was a cease and desist type of thing. I don't know if it ever went to court or if Ubisoft
No,
just said this isn't worth
Ubisoft
it.
probably just settled. Just
This
said,
isn't
okay,
worth
fine,
it.
we'll change it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and so it's now called Phoenix Rising, Immortals Phoenix Rising. The Gods and Monsters tagline was not there, or the name Gods and
Yeah.
Monsters
Oh,
not there
man.
anymore.
I never
because
knew
of-
that was because of Monster.
because of
Energy.
Monster Energy Drink. Well, now they're going after Glowstick. Glowstick has a game coming out called Dark Deception: Monsters and Mortals, and essentially what is happening is what's called a slap suit. And
Yeah.
a slap suit is one that you never actually plan on winning. It's just that you have more money than the person you're suing, and you expect the financial burden on them to be what actually stops them. Monster was suing this small company just because they have the word monster in their video game title, Dark Deception: Monsters and Mortals. The cool news, Glowstick founder and CEO Vincent Livings says he is not backing down.
Go for it.
He's
yeah.
100% standing up to this. He wrote in a tweet, "It's well known that Monster Energy is a notorious trademark troll. Unfortunately, they're at it again. For a company that likes to target their drinks at gamers, they also like to try and bully and bankrupt game studios with lengthy, high-dollar litigation." And he says they are not backing down. They are willing to take this to courts, and they'll win. Like Monster will
Yeah.
lose, right?
I mean, here's the thing: the copyright and like trademark system in this country is pretty terrible.
Yeah.
Like, it's not really about intellectual property. It's not like about protecting your own like creative, interests. It's about claiming money, claiming ownership. So I can't say for sure that they'll lose, but I would really hope so, because I don't know anybody who's ever walked into a GameStop, walked out with a copy of a game with Monster in the title, and said, "What is this? I wanted an energy drink."
I like a Monster Hunter.
That's not a thing.
Monster
Yes,
Hunter has been around
Yeah.
for since before Monster Energy Drink, and which is I'm sure
Capcom should sue Monster Energy.
man, that would be great. I wish Capcom would do that. They won't. You know they won't. But that would be
No, I
so
mean-
cool if Capcom would flex back at Monster and be like, "Excuse me, sir. We were here first. Tell you what, change your name, jerk."
Change your name.
Every time
Oh,
Monster
man.
files a suit against another company, Capcom refiles a suit against them. That would be wonderful. I would do.
that would be great.
Who has more money, Capcom or Monster Energy Drink? I'm going Capcom on that one.
I'm gonna guess Capcom.
Yeah.
The video game industry is massive, and they are a very large part of the video game industry.
Yeah.
Like Monster Hunter, Resident Evil, so many Street Fighter, so many things.
Well, and Capcom is Resident Evil, and Street Fighter,
Yeah.
both of which are huge right now. Movies
Right now,
and
they
TV
are
and
releasing huge.
yeah.
And everybody's favorite movie, the Monster Hunter adaptation.
Yeah. Everybody's wonderful favorite
great.
film. Oh man. All right. Hey Fox, should we get down to the nerdy gritty?
I think so.
Let's get down to the nerdy gritty. Well, folks, I just opened the wrong screen. Not that one. Today we are talking about fantasy racism. Now, you may be wondering, what is fantasy racism? What's going on here? Well, the truth is that there have been for years racism within fantasy worlds. Things like elves always act a certain way, dwarves always act a certain way, or even to the nature of dwarves and elves hate each other. Dark elves are always evil. Things like that have just kind of been in the lore of fantasy for a long, long time. And we as a culture have been trying to address some of the more blatant things. Like, I think the most obvious one is that the dark elves were evil. The light-skinned elves were good elves. The dark-skinned elves were inherently evil.
You cannot roll a drow in D&D, at least to a certain point,
Right.
up until a certain point, without it being like evil in alignment.
Or you'd have to have some sort of reason, like you'd have
Yes.
to narratively describe why you're
Something to go against their inherent nature.
right, right. And so things like that are what's being addressed. Now, the reason this is becoming more and more into the limelight is because Wizards of the Coast specifically has been targeting this in more and more, I don't want to use the word extreme, I will use escalating. They're escalating the ways that they're addressing this a little more every little once in a while. From originally, it was just things like we're trying to get rid of dark elf talk. We're not going to say that any race is inherently evil.
Yeah. Right.
But now they're like, okay, we're changing the word race to the word species.
Yes.
And we're just kind of eliminate that altogether. And now something just released, like just within the last week, saying that they have plans on eliminating all half species. They did not elaborate more than that. To be clear, the article that I read said that was all that was really said. It was kind of like a on the side comment. Like, hey, we're trying to do this, we're trying to do that. For example, in the new player's handbook of 1D&D, there will not be any more half species. We felt that was inherently racist. And then they kind of went on after that. So we don't know exactly what's going to be happening.
Yeah, a little more elaboration on that. What was strange to me was that the half species, like half elf,
Right.
is still something you can create in D&D Beyond. What they are changing is the actual handbook, new player's handbook, PHP.
Right, right.
So what the most like the biggest difference that will make is that in officially sanctioned events, which apparently exist for D&D, I wasn't even aware of that, you will not be able to play anything that's not in the handbook itself.
Right.
So you won't be able to be a half elf in an officially sanctioned D&D something or other, which might relate to like the actual plays and stuff that they sponsor.
So today what we want to talk about is what exactly is going on here?
Yes.
Why are people worried about it? What do we think about how people are addressing it and what's happening here? What are some of the complaints? What are the validity in those complaints? So right off the bat here, Fox, so we've kind of defined fantasy racism as just this addressing of inherent racist tropes within the fantasy genre.
Well, yeah. Can we also let's bring up the outrage that existed about the Rings of Power?
Oh, right.
About
right.
elves, elves, dwarves, people not being all, not an all white cast, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
Saying that it was contrary to J.R.R. Tolkien's vision, as well as very similar, but in the new Lord of the Rings Magic the Gathering crossover set, they have shown spoilers of card art that shows like characters like Aragorn are also not like entire, like not new characters from Lord of the Rings being black,
right,
being non-white, at least, in some sense. So, and there's been some backlash, some outrage from certain parts of the internet about it.
So
yeah,
we're going to be touching all of these topics and talking about them more individually and our thoughts about them. But in general, what do you think about that definition that we're saying here? Just inherent racism within fantasy tropes. Do you think that's what we're getting at here? Or do you think that it's wider than that? Do you think?
Well, we are. That's absolutely true. But the problem with that definition is that it involves racism in the definition of racism. So here's what I actually wanted to do. This is kind of take. So Ibram X. Kendi, he's an author, speaker, academic on race topic, lots of stuff. But he wrote a book called How to Be an Anti-Racist. Excellent book. And I want to take his definition of racism, like that he uses. There are different authors that use different definitions. They all generally agree in various ways. But I'm going to use his right here. This is from page like 17 and 18 of How to Be an Anti-Racist. Racism is a marriage of racist policies and racist ideas that produce and normalize racial inequities. And I think that actually hits the nail on the head, because oftentimes people's issue is that, no, it's not, they have issue with the idea that there is systemic racism, and only want to define it as how people act.
Yeah.
That if people stop being racist, then there would be no more racism. And that, I think, is what Wizard of the Coast is trying to avoid here, or trying to get around, is that they are essentially saying that but of course there are people who are racist who are going to play D&D in a racist way. They can't do anything about that.
Right.
But there are also, Ibram X. Kendi would say, racist policies in D&D's rule books. There is a policy, or was a policy, that if you were a dark elf, you were evil. And so what they are doing to attempt to be, I would say, anti-racist, is to remove that entirely. Not to just give you the option of being good or bad in their policies, but to say, or to give you that option to say that because you are, they are removing that policy that says you have to be this if you are this certain skin color, this certain race. And so I think that's a really good way to look at it, is from Ibram X. Kendi's, that it's both how people perceive things and also how things are developed and codified in the rules of these things that are created.
And that last line, I think, is what really nails it on the head, that inherently contributes to racial inequity.
Yes, yeah, that produce and normalize.
Yeah, normalize racial inequity. And just, again, not that races are different, because colorblindness is not helpful in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
Colorblindness tries to wash everything into whatever your opinion of what normal should be, that all people are the same.
And ignores past injustice.
Right. And so just recognizing cultures and equality of those cultures and things like that is really important. I think a big part of this, though, and what we're talking currently about, like, racism as a whole, and I'm going to continue that, but we'll try to narrow this down here soon. But the problem here is, I think the actual real definition of racism, when we get into what it means to define a word. When we define a word, it's whatever society as a whole considers that word to mean.
Sure.
So with that being said, I think the real definition of racism is anything that considers that is more racist than I am. Anything that considers race more unequal than I do. And that's it.
You could say that about a lot of stuff.
Right.
Something is woke when you are more liberal than I am. Something like that.
And that's it.
Like,
where we are this baseline of what it means to be these things. I'm not racist, but
no.
If there's a little bit worse than me, that's racist. And if you're on that side of me, you're woke, And
I'm a race realist, not a racist.
Right.
Which is the thing people actually say, which always makes me cringe laugh.
That hurts.
It's the worst.
So I think that is a huge part of dealing with this type of stuff, where when we step into this fantasy realm where things are pretend, like literally this is all made up anyway, everybody wants this to meet their standard. And if it's not enough of equality, then they're saying it is racist. If they think they're going too far, then they're saying it's woke. When the reality is there's no inherent actual measurement of this. And trying to meet this moving line, this swaying line, is going to be a tough thing, especially for Wizards of the Coast, who is constantly under scrutiny for a lot of different things, and necessarily so. So I think that the question here now is, if we get into a little more specifically of Wizards of the Coast, let's get into some of the more specific things that they have been doing.
Sure.
The one that's been around for a while now is just changing the word race to species. Yeah. And this is actually something, if you guys go back a few podcasts, when you and I talked about their change to the races, that was my suggestion. I said,
obviously WotC listens.
Yes, they listened to this, and they're like, oh, that's a good idea. Nobody
said, that's good.
Nobody has ever thought of this before.
And never pay them for it.
Right, exactly. So what do you think of this, Fox? Do you think this kind of helps, like, justify or helps placate a lot of the more specific racial traits that they're getting at here, saying that elves are this way, dwarves are this way? Do you think the word species helps change this?
Here's the hard part. The term race, the concept of race in actual human history, was invented as literally as a means to categorize people. It was not, there was no, like, it was a few hundred years ago. It's not even that old of a concept as far as the
Right.
scale of human history goes. And it was not invented just to say, well, you're, black and you're white and you're Asian. It was a hierarchical description of people in order to promote a financial system, essentially, of slavery and
Right.
exploitation.
Exactly.
So using that word in your game system is going to invoke a certain thing for some people and a different thing for other people. You are trying to sell your system to everybody. And so for myself, who up until a year or two ago would have had no problem with the word race being used, because I as with white privilege have never had to deal with my race, or have never been discriminated against, never had to have the, when I was called a honky by a black gentleman in Harlem one time when I was in New York, it was a fun delight, because it was like this like shameful souvenir that I had.
Shameful souvenir.
Because I never had to deal with that, which is like the definition of white privilege.
Right.
But for people whose race has been, a source of derision, a source of discrimination, a source of all these terrible things, seeing that race is a core part of this game system, maybe it won't be a huge deal, maybe it will, but it's going to be something that stands out to them in a way that doesn't for me. And so I applaud the effort to change it to something. But species doesn't feel right. I guess is all I want to say. Species feels animalistic, because we don't talk about the human species unless we're talking in a very like academic, scientific way. We talk about the human people, or the human race even. We use that term for that. So
Yeah.
Species feels weird to say, and that might just be because I'm not used to it. But it feels like, but it is technically accurate. I would say it's even more accurate when used in a D&D context, because these different people groups are inherently different biologically, whereas there is no significant difference across the human species aside from very superficial things. So I don't know. It feels weird, but also maybe it's more correct in that context.
I think exactly that. It feels weird, but in an entirely unimportant way. It feels weird because we're not used to it, and because we as human beings, when we think of species, the moment you get out of the species of human, there is no sentience like intelligent creature. And therefore, to say a species other than us has this immediate thought of, okay, now it's an animal. Now it's now it's an insect.
Now it's something
whatever.
non-human.
Right. And so
categorized differently.
But that's just a hurdle that doesn't take very long to jump. It's like, it's a really, really low hurdle that you can probably step over without issue, especially when you consider things like, okay, calling a kobold a different species, that doesn't feel weird at all. Calling a goblin a different species does not feel weird at all, because they look so different than a human.
They are typically, goblins are villainous. Typically kobolds are enemies.
Right.
They're generally not the standard playable races. They are. You can find them, but they're not in the general core. Like, you don't think of them as part of your party most of the time.
Right. And so,
unless you're, that guy.
And so it's literally just our stereotype of recognizing if you look like a human in some way, if you can describe something as a human with pointy ears, or a short,
tall, pointy ears, short, beard.
stout, big beard human, small, tiny human with big feet, things like that, and that describes it, then it feels weird to call it a different species. But the moment that you cannot say human that is actually lizard, I guess, I don't know, I don't know how to describe that, then it feels just fine to say different species. And so I think this is great, because the moment we can just jump that very teeny tiny hurdle of just calling elves a different species and calling dwarves a different species, then I think, because I don't think anybody would have a problem saying the species of cheetah is inherently faster than the species of sloth. That's it. That is a fact, and that's not stereotypical or anything. That is real. And also, the species of dwarf is inherently more constitutional, sturdy. I don't know what
sturdier,
has a better constitution than the race of elf, or the species of elf.
they're constitutional originalists. They adhere to the Constitution more than those liberal commies elves.
Yeah, communistic elves. Why does that
Which
feel
actually is probably
normal?
more correct.
Yeah, I
That
was saying,
actually
why does that feel
feels
right?
More correct. Now that I think about it.
You and I came to that conclusion at the same time. It's like, wait, that actually feels good. That sounds right. Anyways, so I genuinely think this is a great idea. I think that this is allowing them to have a lot of these species inherent qualities without it feeling like a racial thing. You know, like you hear people say things like black people are more natural athletes. Like, stop that. Don't do that. That one's bad. Like that feels real bad. It allows
Also
them
incorrect. Also incorrect. Factually incorrect. There was nothing about the biological makeup of somebody with more melatonin that makes them a better athlete.
So it allows them to divorce themselves from people who say things like that into more of an actual like biology, zoology type thing.
Yeah.
And so I really like this decision. I think it makes perfect sense. And I think that I haven't heard anybody complain about it really.
I mean, I've seen people complain because it's different,
Right.
which is often the thing. But the other suggestion I've seen, which made sense to me, was why not just use creature type, which is already part of the D&D system.
Right.
Every sentient being you encounter has a creature type. But, you know, I agree. Species makes sense also. Both of them would make sense to me.
And I think that creature type already also has a rule. Like there's humanoid creatures and
That's true.
And there are, you know, ooze creatures and things like that.
You are still a humanoid. You have a creature type also
with
along
your species.
With your species.
Yeah.
So
So
that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so now it seems like Wizards of the Coast has taken some more steps, though, which is kind of why we wanted to talk about this. Is
Sure.
Now they're saying as this continues, we want to eliminate the half-species language from our books altogether.
He was pounding the podium very forcefully and saying, "We must eliminate the half species." It was very unfortunate.
He looked at everybody and said, "I just feel like racial integrity species integrity. Species
we
integrity
here at Wizards of the Coast
needs to be kept."
Use the term wizards for a reason. We are grand in our pursuit of...
So what do you think about this? They said that the term half species is an inherently racist phrasing. What do you think?
I mean, when we talk about a half elf, we talk about a person in the game that is, you know, I assume one of their parents was an elf, one of their parents was human. Is typically, I've never seen a half elf that is half dwarf, half elf. Like, so I don't know. I'm just kind of, I'm not saying that's, we are talking about half parentage, as in mixed race, essentially, to use terminology. So, I mean, wouldn't it be technically true? But also, you are, when you say half elf, inherently deciding what is more worthy of just being described as. If I say you're half black, depending on the way I'm saying it, I have made a decision on what's more important or what's less important about you. So the problem here is I don't know how do you change that? How do you, like, I agree that it again feels kind of weird and might not be the best way to use best terminology for it. I'm not sure what it would be changed to. Again, this is something I've never had to deal with as a white guy.
This is something that I think, and you say, you know, not really think about as a white guy, and this is where I think that, again, kind of my thought process on this with some experience on having to describe your race to people and whatnot. This is why I think they're doing this, why I think this is a good idea if they manage to continue, like, to include the cross species in a different way. But you mentioned the phrase half black, or if somebody were to say they're half Mexican, or if somebody were to say they were half Asian, what is the assumption in there?
Sure.
The automatic assumption is white. If somebody says they are half black,
That's a fair point.
nobody
yeah.
stops and asks, what's your other half? If somebody says you're half Mexican, nobody
Yeah,
stops and
okay.
asks, what is the other half? There is this assumption that that is white, meaning
White
that
is the default.
white is the default. White is normal. In this exact same situation, there are half elves, half orcs, half whatever. There
other
is a
half-
default species to these, and that
Other
default
half is always human.
human. It's automatically human. And in fact, there is not in the rules right now, there is not a way to be half dwarf, half elf. There is not a way to be half this, half that. I know this.
But Des, how tall would you be? I don't know.
I know this because I have had players who wanted to be these things. Like, wait, how do I do this? And we've had to work this out, like out of game, kind of like merge some rules here and there.
Homebrew.
Yeah, homebrew some stuff. And so when they bring this half lingo, this half language, it really means that there is a default that is meant to be here. That is the normal, the normalized half of that. And if, again, as we say half Mexican, it should be half white, half Mexican. You know, bring that don't normalize one thing over the other. So in this case, what I hope that they do, obviously, don't eliminate cross species. Don't do that.
No, that wouldn't make any sense.
That would be worse. Hey, wizards, that would be worse.
I'm assuming that they're not thinking of doing that. That would be, I would hope that one of them would say, hey, wait a minute.
I think what would be super cool is if they had the elven species and the dwarven species, and then there's a list of racial traits. And then they have an entire other rule set of if you want to be half species or quarter species or whatever else, if you're going to be half species, you can choose 2 of the racial traits from each race and have those. You can choose 1 of the ability bonuses from each species and have that.
Yeah.
And you can choose these things, and that's what you can get from them. You want to be a quarter, then you choose 1 of the species traits from each of these things and 1 of or half of the ability bonus from each species and bring it to your character. Make it so you can break this down in whatever way you want without any sort of questioning, and just have it be like mixed species rules or half species or part species rules, and have that be something, make it a mechanic of, because then at that point you can have some people who were, my dad was a dwarf, my mom was an elf, but I didn't get dark vision. I got my mom's side of things, not my dad's side of things, or whatever else.
And recessive genes and all that kind of stuff.
But maybe there's a different person who did get that. And I think that builds more character at that point.
100%. That sounds super cool.
Yeah. So again, if we take this into the racial world, my oldest daughter is much more tan with much darker hair with the browner eyes. She looks way more Latina than my middle child, my son, who has much lighter skin and kind of like a sandy brunette hair, and same children, same parents, but they just got different genes. I think a mechanic that allows you to pick what sort of stuff, narratively describe how this happened to you or what was going on in that, and put that into your character. I think that'd be brilliant.
Yeah, I've got a new product from WotC actually just announced. It's called 23andMe and D&D. And you will be able to learn the genetic history of your characters.
Man, if they do build a mechanic like this, there's going to be a player that immediately is like, how can I be like, I don't know, 5% of 20 different races? Can we...
I'm going to min-max my character's genetic history.
Oof.
Turns out...
no. Maybe this is suddenly a bad idea.
Yeah, this might actually become a eugenics issue. Uh-oh.
Okay. We wanted to breed out this trait of that species, so we have been...
Hold on. That's the next book. That's the next book. You got Wizard Hitler.
I mean...
But then better than the Harry Potter one.
I was going to say, there's already a Grindelwald, but still...
Better than that. They didn't do it. That was weird.
So, all this to say that... I really, really hope that they don't eliminate half species altogether. I just hope that they create a mechanic that allows for these to be more nuanced rather than making one species the default and then saying, here are some different things here and there.
It's essentially getting into the one drop rule, which basically is the idea that if you have even just the slightest hint of, black features or black ancestry or whatever, you're black. Even if you would not, you're white or other, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes one drop of black blood to be black, rather than and unless so you want to avoid that.
Yeah,
in your
eliminate
fantasy
that.
game.
Get that out of there.
Yeah, good. I think it's a good impulse, and I hope it's done well. It seems like they, in that article you sent me, it seems like they have a good system now, probably pretty new to them, but where all their rules, everything, all their revisions and stuff are sent to some kind of group or some kind of whatever
DEI type group.
Yeah, DEI kind of just takes a look at it and says, hey, actually this doesn't really sit well, this doesn't work, and then it gets sent back, and then they revise it and send it back. Like, it goes through a couple iterations, including artwork, which is really cool, because they ran into that with one of their newer books where they kind of used a
Spelljammer.
older picture that just was kind of stereotyped. So no, it sounds like they have a good system, and or a better system than they've had in the past.
So for you guys,
they have one.
They're the developers, and the developers said, we make rule systems and make sure they're balanced. That is
how much
our job.
How much damage a creature can
Exactly. We know how much damage we know how much damage a creature should do, or a weapon should do. That's what we do. We don't know, this other type of stuff. So there is a separate group that we send this stuff to, and we run it by them. And I think that's brilliant. It's a really, really good idea.
Well, yeah, I think it's necessary at this point.
So then now let's go on to the MTG side of things.
And the Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Marjorie Taylor Greene side of things. Man,
she's great.
For work, how? Oh, hey guys, we just lost Fox. He's been eliminated from the podcast for some reason. What happened here? Oh no.
I've been canceled. Being censored.
So in Magic the Gathering, there's a Lord of the Rings Secret Lair coming out.
Yeah.
And it looks super cool. There's a lot of cool stuff.
I played Magic in 10 years, but I want to buy it.
Yeah. That's why they're doing this, man. You are the demographic for this.
I am the demographic.
You are the demographic.
Audience.
But what has kind of been the big hubbub here is that Aragorn in the pictures, in the cards, is a black man. Other than that, there's no other narrative things or whatever else, but he is depicted as a black man, where in the books, he is physically described as a white man. And so there has been a lot of backlash. That's what I'm looking for. A lot of backlash from particularly the Lord of the Rings community
Outrage.
on the misrepresentation of Aragorn in this. Fox, are they wrong per se? Do they have a point? I mean, what do you think about this? Again, he is very well described in the books.
Sure, they are technically right if the goal is to one for one depict everything as exactly as J.R.R. Tolkien described. If that's the goal, clearly it's not. So I would say they're also incorrect that it's not a misrepresentation, because their goal was not to do that. Their goal was to present an Aragorn who has a higher concentration of melanin in his skin. So, okay. I mean, like, it's kind of yes, and like they're ascribing what you should have been doing this, so therefore you got it wrong. And they were like, oh no, we didn't want to do that, so we got it right. What we wanted to do was this, and we did it. So good job, us.
I think that it is okay to look at that and say, oh, I wish it looked more like the Aragorn that was in my head. I wish it looked more like the Aragorn that I read about. And I think that there's nothing wrong with that. I think we have that problem a lot in any sort of narrative thing, where when a real life, like in-person depiction or an artist depiction comes of it and the character doesn't look like what we pictured in our head, people had a lot of problem with the Harry Potter books, that Ron did not look like he's described in the book. He's supposed to be kind of tall and lanky, whereas,
same with same with Hermione.
Yeah.
She was,
And I think that's fine to have that thought of, oh man, it doesn't look like what I want him to look like. When we take it to say he shouldn't be black, I think that's where we start getting into dangerous territory. I saw a meme that was just, it said the news title with the picture, Wizards of the Coast race swaps Aragorn for their Lord of the Rings secret lair, and then it's the picture of the card, and then it's the meme of SpongeBob getting up from the chair like, I'm a head out. And at the bottom it says, I'm a head out to fight Wizards of the Coast for ruining a wonderful IP.
What did what did they ruin?
This is my problem with that kind of mindset is how in the world does Aragorn's skin color ruin the story of Lord of the Rings? What part of the narrative does that play? What part
did you not also see that they went and changed every single book? They now they are legally required to say that he is black in every book they're publishing.
There's people from Penguin House. I don't know who prints who owns Lord of the Rings these days, but they're going into every library, every bookstore.
All libraries are being edited. People who remember the originals, the Men in Black,
the Men in Black are there with their neuralizers,
flashing their brains.
So the good news is eventually you won't know otherwise, guys. It's gonna be
exactly.
It's gonna have changed to you.
It's fine.
Yeah. No, but again, this doesn't change the narrative at all. I do understand a bit of the, man, that's not how I imagined this character looking. I wish they looked a little bit different. To me, that's honestly just fine. But to say that this ruins an IP or to say that this ruins anything is an overreaction that honestly feels petty and silly to me.
Yeah, what you're saying is a black person being present ruins this story.
Yeah.
That is literally what you're saying. Because the skin color of Aragorn was never a plot element, was never this is the difference between like quote unquote race swapping and whitewashing. Is if you put out a new movie about Martin Luther King Jr. and he's played by Viggo Mortensen, you're going to have some problems because this person's skin color was inherent to his struggle, was inherent to his story. Now you put out a new Lord of the Rings with Donald Glover as the new Aragorn, which would be amazing. It'd be so much fun and goofy. And
in my research for this,
because Donald Glover is hilarious.
In my research of this, I saw an AI, like several AI generated images of Will Smith as Aragorn, and they're pretty good.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. It would literally change something about the story because his skin color had no impact. He was a leader of a race of men who was coming back, to take his place on the throne, essentially, amidst this great struggle against evil and the destruction of the ring and all that. And none of it ever had to do with the skin color of the people involved.
Right.
Also, I do want to throw this out here. Looking at the one wiki to rule them all, the Lord of the Rings wiki, Tolkien gives a brief but detailed description of him in Lord of the Rings, obviously talking about Aragorn.
Right.
Lean, dark, tall, with a shaggy head of dark hair flecked with gray, and in a pale, stern face, a pair of keen gray eyes. He describes him as having a pale face, but also describes him as dark. You tell me what he's supposed.
How can he be dark and pale, J.R.R. Tolkien? How dare you?
Can I also say something else about this? Let us imagine for a second that J.R.R. Tolkien, secretly huge racist. I don't know if there's a lot of evidence for that. I don't think so. What if he was? Then screw the guy. His stories were still good, and we'll depict him however we want. We'll throw it in his face. It's like Taika Waititi being Hitler. when asked in interviews,
every time Mel Brooks has played Hitler.
Sure, 100%. Yes, because Taika Waititi is obviously a person of color and also Jewish, and so when he was asked in interviews, like, how did you research to do this, to be this character? And he's like, I didn't.
0%.
I didn't. And it's the best way to throw this idiot's, this guy, his whole deal in his face is to make him look like a big buffoon.
Yeah.
By the people he despised. So at the end of the day, obviously, I'm not saying that J.R.R. Tolkien is Hitler. I'm not saying I don't think there's any evidence of him being a racist. I would hope not. But if he was, fine, Okay, then screw the guy. Why would we want? Why would we want to depict it as he depicted it? Let's just do something else.
And again, at the end of the day, I don't think it really matters if he was or was not. It comes down to the reality of how does the skin color impact the overall story? It doesn't.
Yeah.
And
it does not.
sometimes maybe it does. Like maybe there is, like you mentioned, what did you mention already? Martin Luther King. Maybe there's a story like that where the skin color does actually matter, or it does depict some sort of importance to the story. Like if there's a story about Pocahontas and John Smith. If John Smith were black, that would be weird because
That would not work.
right, because it inherently his color as a colonizer matters in this case. And
Yes.
so I think that again, I think there is validity in when we are disappointed that a character does not look that the way we had depicted them in our brains. That happens a lot all throughout books. But when we try to say that this ruins the story for some reason, I think that becomes petty and silly and dumb.
Right. It also just blinds us to being able to enjoy something.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is a lot of good stuff. I mean, thinking back on it, the more I think about Rings of Power, the more I actually really appreciate what it did and the difficulties of how they were supposed to write that. And I really like none of it that enters my mind is, oh, that person needed to look different and that would have made it better. Like what you are saying is even like essentially, if this person was white, even if everything else was the same, it would be better. That is a racist thought.
Yeah.
That is an inherently racist thought. You can have problems with the writing, sure. The storyline, even maybe like the interaction with the timeline of J.R.R. Tolkien's history, sure. I'll get that. But if I forget his name, but or if Durin's wife, Dursa? I forget
Sure.
her name. I'm trying to remember. If she were white, would it be, if you think it's going to be better because of it, that is a racist thought.
That is absolutely a racist thought. Okay, so last question for us to wrap this up. Is there a too much? At what point is there like, okay, we need to reel this back a little bit. We need to calm this down a little bit. You're going a little bit far with your goal of eliminating fantasy racism.
No, I don't think there's a too much.
I think there is.
Really?
Yeah. I think that when we
What would you say that line is?
trying to pretend that it doesn't exist. If there's a point in which we are now saying that you're not allowed to, in the narrative world of this, racism doesn't exist as a rule, as a way that this goes. If in some way they try to say that you mechanically cannot have this in your game, I think that becomes unrealistic and trying to turn a blind eye to the reality of the world.
Can I have what?
Racism. Like you cannot have some sort of prejudice or bias in the world.
Yeah.
So if
I don't think anybody's ever tried to do that though.
but again, we're asking the question: is there a too far? And I do think that there is a point in which we have to allow the reality of racism in the real world to be reflected in our fantasy world as well.
Sure, but that's a storytelling issue. That's not a like. I mean, we do have to remember that at the end of the day, in like things like D&D, the rules are suggestions. You get to do whatever you want.
But they are mechanically changing a lot of story things as it is right now too. Just the history of these cultures and the history of these peoples and whatnot. The narrative of it is changing for the better. Again, for the better. But if they then try to say that, magically in this world, racism has never existed, it's been wiped from people's memory, it's not a real thing. So, mechanically, just so you know, in our rule books, there's no such thing as fantasy racism. I think that turns a blind eye to reflecting a real world in a fantasy setting. And I think that like letting there be a history like, hey, historically, there has been a tense relationship between dwarves and elves. Here are the reasons why. I think things like that are not only fine, but also build an interesting narrative.
Conflict needs to exist. Yes.
Yeah. And so I think that saying this is something that a younger generation is trying to move past or something like that would be really interesting as well, reflecting on our real world. Sure. But when we try to narratively eliminate this altogether from our fantasy, I think that's too far when it no longer reflects our real world.
You're talking about like institutionalized color blindness, essentially.
Yeah.
Does not exist, which is something that's trying to happen in real life in certain places. But
Yeah, no, I agree. When you say when it's too far, I'm thinking of like I had a quote unquote conversation with somebody on YouTube who was complaining about wokeism, and I asked what if they could define woke for me. It's always my favorite thing to go to because
Yeah.
nobody ever has they either have to just make something ridiculous up or say something that they are against, and it's funny because that just they're outing themselves as racist. And anyway, so they talked about like, oh, wokeism is this, but it can go too far. And I said, well, what's too far? And they said, well, the show Velma, for instance. I haven't watched Velma. That didn't help me.
It's
wasn't
funny.
a question to my answer.
I enjoyed it.
Sure. But at the end of the day, like, too many people are not white. Is that woke? Is that too bad? Is that the bad part? Is it talking about injustice? That's too much. It really just comes down to your personal level of and at the end of the day, if you don't like Black Aragorn, don't buy those magic cards.
Yeah.
Boycott WotC. That's perfectly within your rights. But like, it's just, I don't think there's when it comes to yes, I don't want a fantasy whitewash or fantasy colorblind, not whitewash, colorblind. That doesn't make any sense as a storytelling method. But yeah, I don't think there's any kind of make everybody non-white. Who cares? We've had Lord of the Rings with all white casts up until last year, and everybody got angry about it because there was not an all white cast.
Right.
So
I will say that again,
it's the one drop rule, but for writing.
If we go with a narrative, there are no such thing as white people in here, I think that is also not the right way to go. Like, I think that you can have an all people of color cast with no white people at all, but to say like narratively no whiteness here.
Well, depending on the setting of your, if I'm reading, there's a series called Akata Witch. It's a fantasy series. It's a young adult series. It's essentially Harry Potter, but set in Nigeria. It's an all black cast.
Right.
Like there's no white people in the story as far as I can remember. There's a character who lived in America and then came back, the main character. And so it's like, well, narratively, it makes sense. There's no white people here. It just doesn't have any impact. It's a Nigerian story about Nigerian folklore.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Yeah, I'm not saying, we don't need to. Yeah, it's also not trying to say that white people don't exist. I don't know. I think there's a time and place for everything. I'd be perfectly fine with stories that don't have white people in them and don't even mention white people at all.
Yeah. I do agree with that.
Know if they exist. At the end of the day, we all get to decide what we like and what we don't like. But if a black person being present makes you not like it, that's a real problem.
So I think overall, if something's race or species is a way that you don't want it to be and you think that ruins everything, you might want to look inward on that a little bit.
Yeah, take a sec, take a beat.
Yeah.
What does that say?
Why does that bother you?
Yeah.
All right. I think that's about enough of that conversation. Let's
We've
decompress.
solved racism. Let's move on.
We fixed it, and now the world can live happily ever after. No,
right.
let's decompress, move on a little bit here. Fox, what have you been up to, my friend?
I, on a whim, watched Pitch Black.
Yeah.
Over the last week, basically, I watch movies in piecemeal nowadays. But and just remembering, like, man, I watched Chronicles of Riddick when it came out in theaters, and was very confused because I had never heard about Riddick. And then at one point, I was like, "Oh, Pitch Black is the first one? That doesn't make." Anyway, I watched Pitch Black. It's a pretty good movie.
Yeah.
That is brought down by the need to have like this cool action man, and also some of the 90s kind of like filming techniques. Like it kind of straddles that line where it's like, this would be really good if it kind of pulled back on a few things. And also I think the character of Riddick in that movie is kind of hampered by having action one-liners when he's supposed to be like this animalistic, mysterious figure who's, you can never quite tell what he's doing, but then when he kills an animal, he like didn't know who he was effing with, and you're like, okay, Vin, okay, Mr. Diesel, that's Vin Diesel becoming Riddick. That's not
Riddick. Yeah,
you need Riddick in here and not Vin Diesel.
I think this goes back to our
Pitch Black was good.
Our pre-podcast discussion of remakes. I'd love to see a remake of Pitch Black. The whole like Act 1 even act 1.5 of the movie is getting you to be concerned about Riddick and
Yes.
wondering, like, how is he doing this? How is he killing all these people? And then it
Well,
like takes
he
this.
actually doesn't. Well, no spoilers.
Oh, I was gonna spoil it right now.
Oh, okay, sure.
I'm
that's
gonna
fine.
spoil it, and then
Yeah,
it
if you want
takes
to,
this
that's
turn, and you realize it's not him. It's never been him the whole time.
Mhm.
Oh, by the way, now he has to be your savior. He has to be the one to save you. Like,
Now we have to trust this man who is apparently a murderer.
right. Which, I mean, you in the audience, it's an interesting turn for you because, again, the movie itself has started all throughout Act 1 getting you to be afraid. And again, even into Act 2, afraid and not afraid, but like concerned, considering this guy the
Concerned,
antagonist.
Just distrustful. Yeah.
Yeah. And now you as the audience have to learn to trust this man. I think it's really well done. I agree with you that it's super 90s. It's so 90s, and it's
It
definitely
is.
hampered by that. But they tried to rectify that with what was the third one?
Well, right now it's Chronicles of Riddick, and then the third one is just called Riddick,
Riddick. That's right, Riddick.
which I haven't watched ever. I'm watching the Chronicles of Riddick right now.
Riddick is basically Pitch Black over again,
Oh.
and but not as good because they're trying
Sure.
too hard. So anyway.
The problem is any movie that puts Vin Diesel in the starring role is going to be hampered a little bit. He's not a great actor. He's very charismatic, but not a great actor.
I have watched season 2 of Shadow and Bone. Shadow and Bone was a Netflix show that came out a couple of years ago, pre-pandemic, and it was spectacular. It was so good. It was this really interesting. The way I describe it to people is Avatar: The Last Airbender set in World War I Russia, where everybody has these elemental powers, or like even like controlling the heart and the blood of people, or controlling metal, like being able to build things, but also wind, air, fire,
Sure.
but only certain people have this. They're called Grisha, and it is all set in kind of like this
This
war
is the
torn.
Grisha verse. Okay.
Yeah, the Grishaverse. Yeah.
All right. I've heard that term. I never knew what it was.
Yeah, and it's all kind of in this war-torn Russia area that they actually have. I mean, it's not actually Russia; it's called Ravka, but
Sure.
to the north are the Fjerdans, and the Fjerdans live in this cold area, and to the east of us is Shuhan, and the Asian culture.
Oh
And
man,
like-
that's a whole thing in fantasy. Also, is Orientalism and all these things of like. Anyway, that's a whole other topic.
yeah, so
Or similar topic.
obviously it's clearly meant to be in Russia. All this to say though, the show was spectacular. It brought in racism. It brought in like the fear of power. It brought in a lot of this cool stuff. There was heist elements to it. It was so good. And then I went and I read the books, and the books were pretty good. The show was better than the books.
Yeah, I remember you saying that the adaptation, like it was one of those very rare instances of a adaptation being better than the original.
Absolutely, yes. I watched season 2, and it was not good.
Oh.
Disappointingly and frustratingly not good.
Not just less good, but
Not good. Yeah.
Okay.
It started out, it was clearly number 1, clearly barely got re-upped for season 2, and
I see.
its budget was cut pretty heavily. You
Okay.
could see that right off the bat, but hey, that's fine. I'm okay with low quality
Sure.
CG and low quality director stuff, but the writing was also rough, really like canned writing. Actors who performed great in season 1 were hindered in their performance in season 2 because of the writing in it. But what really frustrated me was about halfway through the season, they changed everything. It was a new story being told, entirely different from the books. And so imagine you are watching a Lord of the Rings TV show, and everything through Fellowship of the Ring and Two Towers happens as it should, with some changes here and there because it's television.
Sure.
Then in the Return of the King, it starts getting like midway through this show, and all of a sudden Aragorn is like, well, Arwen, I guess it's not going to work out between us. You go to the Grey Havens, I'm going to end up marrying Eowyn. And
I
then
decided to become a rapper.
yeah, and then he marries Eowyn, and then all of a sudden he's like, and you know what else? I think I'm going to keep the ring. And he keeps and it all comes about how
Ooh.
he's kind of
See, this
turning.
sounds really interesting to me.
And so it's interesting, but it's not the Lord of the Ring book. It's something new now, and it's not what you want. It's not what you're expecting. We talked earlier about when things change your depiction of what you expect and how that can be frustrating. When it's an entirely different story, and I'll be honest, not a good one, not told very well, not acted very well.
That's the worst part.
not
for me.
written very
if it's
well.
just not good, then that's the real problem.
Yeah, I guess that was my biggest frustration, that they had a good story. A good story was there in front of them, opened in a literal book. Here is good story. And they thought, yeah, but what about bad story that I make up? What if I shake up everything that you expect from the story?
I've also got this fan fiction. You
Right,
want me to throw
exactly
in there?
that, man. And it was really frustrating. It ends on a cliffhanger that I promise you will not get picked up again. It'll be that cliffhanger forever. But it was disappointing. Even if season 3 comes out, I probably won't watch it.
I just realized it's now my turn to talk something. I've been kind of spotty. Let me look at the books I've read recently. Why don't you go ahead and do your
Sure,
next
I'll go do my next one here. I've
Yeah.
also been watching The Mandalorian. I'm
Oh yeah.
caught up currently with The Mandalorian on Disney Plus, and shocking, it's real good. It's real good. This one I'm really enjoying because they are in season 2. They went a little bit more into the sci-fi. There was a lot of space robots and Jedis and things like that. This one, they seem to be kind of pulling back a little bit and going back into more of the Western. But more importantly, they are taking a deep look into the Mandalorian culture, the Mandalorian religion, why it is what it is, how it happens, like the rules of it, and kind of growing it. There are converts to the Mandalorian religion in this, and how that works for them, as well as how they're trained, how it's made. Like, it's a really interesting look into actual Mandalore and the culture and planets of Mandalore. And I am hooked. Once again, hooked on what is happening, and really excited to see where the story goes as it continues.
Is Grogu there?
Grogu is there for the whole thing. In fact,
Oh, he's already back?
he is a youngling. He is a foundling.
Hold on. Okay. How much time was in between second and third season? Like in universe?
Not a lot. Why?
I'm just asking, like, so Luke shows up to take him, and then he's just back?
Did you watch Boba Fett?
No.
You have to watch Boba Fett. There are 3 episodes in Boba Fett that have to do with the Mandalorian.
I've chosen not to care about, like, watch all the Star Wars stuff anymore.
So,
I'm just asking.
In Book of Boba Fett,
It feels like he's back already. Okay, cool, whatever.
in Book of Boba Fett, he's training with Luke, and he trains with Luke for a while. But then Luke does all right, you have to give up, if you're going to be a Jedi, you have to give up everything else right now, and we're going to focus on being a Jedi. And then at one point, Din Djarin, the Mandalorian, comes to visit, and there's this, like, Luke's like, hey, you can't keep confusing him like this. Like, he's got to focus on one or the other. And so there was like, okay, let him choose. Who do you want to go with? And then,
is an Airbud situation.
and then it was a smash cut to him
was an
flying
Airbud.
away with, yeah, exactly.
They're standing at different ends of
He'll come to who he really loves. Here, boy. Here, Grogu. Come here, Grogu.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so, but he goes with the Mandalorian. So
Okay.
he has some Jedi training, but he is a foundling. He is training to be a Mandalorian.
Is
now.
he still a tiny little bean?
Yeah,
or
he is.
Okay.
And it's super
I
cool.
mean, obviously Yoda doesn't get.
And he does
they don't get
Yoda
much
flips.
bigger, but
He does Yoda flips.
all right, you've made me glad I'm not watching it because that sounds really stupid. I have been reading some, like, been reading a lot of manga, whole lot of manga. But I've been reading some Junji Ito stuff. You know, the very famous horror manga author, most famous I think for Uzumaki, famous for a lot of stuff. And I read his Frankenstein. It's a book that it's like a compilation of it's his, like, Frankenstein adaptation and then a few other stories. And I have decided that I love things about his writing. I love his art style. I love his body horror. It gets real weird and real gross most of the time. I do not like how he ends his story. They are always, I would say, pretty much always unsatisfying.
Kind of like an M. Night Shyamalan thing where it's always meant to be a twist, but it's always predictable because it's always meant to be a twist.
It's not really a twist. It's just that most of the time the stories just end. And I'm okay with, like, something that feels not like I'm okay with a not happy end. I'm fine with oh, everything is things are bad still, or it just got worse, or whatever, or the bad guy won, or whatever. Most of the time, though, his stories just seem to end at a certain point. It almost feels like he just couldn't think of an ending, and so he didn't include it in there, including, which again, this is an adaptation of Frankenstein, of Mary Shelley, and it might just be an adaptation of the same ending. But at the ending of his Frankenstein series, what Victor Frankenstein dies he's pursuing his creation to kill it, and then dies before he does, and his creation, the quote unquote monster, is just upset and says, I'll be in isolation forever now, and then it just ends. And
that's kind of how Frankenstein ends the book.
That's sure. I'll give it that. But even his original stories kind of, I don't know, maybe it's just the way he depicted it in his Frankenstein adaptation or something. But it always just feels like, okay, that was the end. Let's move on now.
Yeah.
And I
he just got tired of writing it and was like, all right, that's the end.
Yes, it almost feels that way. Same with like Uzumaki, where like at the end, like you have these kids find this whole like underground like city made of spirals, and then it just ends, and there's nothing like it. I don't really. It's not my cup of tea, and I don't know how much more. I'll probably read some more of him if I if it's at the library. But been pretty disappointed with Junji Ito, especially for how well regarded he is. I like his artwork, and that's about it.
All right, this is the last one I'll talk about because I'm excited to talk about.
All right.
I am reading, just about to finish, Long Live the Pumpkin Queen, the canonical sequel to Nightmare Before Christmas.
Okay, who's it written by?
Oh, that is a spectacular question that I know the answer to, that I'm going to tell you. I know it.
I just need to do some unrelated typing.
Right. Shea M. Shah. Shea M. Shah.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, yeah. This is, as said before, the canonical sequel to Nightmare Before Christmas. It takes the place, the first-person perspective of Sally, and how she, in the first, or in the movie, did not get a lot of character building. She didn't get much background, whatever else.
No, she's just kind of like sad.
Right. She is
friend.
Yeah, she is more than just like the damsel in distress or whatever. There was more to her than that, but not a lot going on. This digs real deep into her psyche, kind of the things she worries about and thinks about, her introversion, how it digs into the reality that she was basically a slave for years, decades even, that she was locked in a room and like abused mentally and verbally by Dr. Finkelstein, and like the trauma that she has from this. And it talks to her about now. Here she has married, the open is her and Jack's wedding. The very open is her and Jack's wedding. And then people come to her and they say, you're the first ever pumpkin queen. Jack is the pumpkin king. You're the first ever pumpkin queen. And her like dealing with this like realization, like, oh my gosh, like, hold on, I'm not ready for this. I love Jack and I want to marry him and I'm glad that we're married, but I'm not ready to be royalty and to co-lead a country or whatever. Then it goes into her goal to escape this, and in doing so, a problem that she causes that she ends up having to solve herself. I will not go into it too deeply, but suffice to say that she visits every other holiday, including a until this point unknown holiday, or just not holiday, unknown door in the forest, and that is where a lot of the problems come from. It is a honest 10-year-old focused story, but it still does a really good job of explaining some serious things. Cool. It's genuinely good. I'm really enjoying it. The antagonist is eerie and spooky in a Michael Myers way, in as much as the antagonist doesn't really say or do anything.
He sounds like Shrek.
Exactly, like Shrek. But I just got it. Michael Myers. There it is. Yeah, Myers. Okay. But in as much as it's just kind of there and always looming and ominous, it's always this threat that you know is there and could appear at any time. And it does carry that weight with it. But it also goes into her parentage is she actually made by Dr. Finkelstein, or was she kidnapped as a child? We don't know for sure right now. So it's really interesting. It's a genuinely good book that takes a really good look into the character of Sally. In fact, I would say it does more character building than the movie itself in any way for any character. So yeah, it's a great book. I'm really enjoying it.
I also read Nonverts, very different, genre here, very different, take a turn here. It's called Nonverts, The Making of Ex-Christian America.
Oh, interesting.
Essentially, an obviously nonfiction book talking about examining the fact that there has been a pretty drastic increase in the amount of people who have converted from a religion in general, in America, mostly Christianity, to nothing, to no religion.
The nuns.
Yeah, the nuns. In fact, the author Stephen Bullivant uses that term throughout it, and I listened to it. So I had to, from time to time, tell myself he's not talking about Catholic nuns.
Nope, not N-U-N, N-O-N-E.
Not those nuns.
Yes.
People who just check none when asked their religion on a survey or something.
Yeah.
That.
So there's been a long time thing among religion of the rise of the nuns, and that's who checks N-O-N-E nun when on a survey when your religion is asked, and how this is becoming. It will soon be the largest religious demographic in America.
Right. It was really interesting. Obviously, or not obviously. But it's still fair. I mean, it's a increasing thing, but I think this is one of the first like kind of real books about the topic. So it feels kind of early on. A lot of his information, he had a lot of statistical information, of course, but a lot of what he did was go interview people and kind of how they view religion nowadays. What caused them to be a non-vert. All that kind of stuff, which was really interesting to see, just the wide ranging, like, yeah, I was abused, all of this, the church was terrible. Other people said, my parents absolutely told me, we only put you in church so that you would get some morals, but we didn't actually care about the church. We, it wasn't a thing that we
right.
Religious. We just wanted you to be more. There were some people. There was one really interesting interviewee who said, "Yeah, my parents actually told me later on, of course, that they put me in church so that I would recognize the problems with religion and be inoculated against it in the future."
Woof.
Which was really interesting to me. Really interesting to me, and yes, hurts me as a Christian. Like, that's fair. Like, honestly, that's fair to do sometime. Like, that makes sense to me. So it was really interesting. I mean, spoilers overall, like the major reasons it gives, it wasn't like trying to diagnose. That wasn't the point. It was kind of just exploring the concept of a non-vert and what it's like to move from a religious space to non-religious, and what kind of persists in your life because of it or doesn't. But overall, mostly it was the church was the problem.
Yeah.
I converted to nothing because the church was X, Y, and Z, and I did not want to be part of that religion anymore. The other part of it was, one of the other big parts was the internet. If you were a atheist in a small town and therefore had a lot of people not like you or didn't feel a big sense of community because you were supposed to be a Christian, then when the internet came around and all of a sudden there's a message board where it's just hundreds of people who are atheists, you can talk to them immediately, share your opinions. People agree with you. It makes you more confident, makes you more bold. You're more than willing to, like, the internet has decreased the space, so to speak, in between people and allowed that to become less of a stereotype, less of a mark, less of a pariah because more people are like you.
I'll be releasing a video soon about the rise of nerddom and how the internet was a big part of it as well. That for the 80s and 90s, being a nerd, you had to hide. 70s as well, because there was nobody else like you around. You were the abnormal one. But when the internet was created, you were able to find forums and rooms and and then all of a sudden, nerddom had something it never had before: confidence.
Which is true for a lot of things.
Yeah.
That, there's the internet has seen an increase in white supremacy and things like that because of the same reason. It just allows people to gather together more quickly and see other points of view and agree and discuss.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting to see like how those things impacted religion in general. So I do recommend reading it, but take it as my interpretation was that it was kind of early on research into this topic. So it wasn't like definitive, I guess, to say in anything. It was just kind of exploring the topic.
Nice. Well, that's all I got.
Same here.
Then thank you all so much for listening / watching. We appreciate you being here. To all of you who were in our stream with us, thank you for being here with us while we stream and being patient. We'll address your guys' comments here in a second. For those of you who are listening on this podcast later, just a reminder that we stream this every other Wednesday. And so if you want to be active on the conversation, you can come join us every other Wednesday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/savepointmin, and come check us out. We also want to say thank you to Granger for the use of our theme song. All my friends have Wi-Fi, and so do most of my neighbors. Off of the album Dear Sam. Thanks, Granger, for the use of the theme song.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. We are not currently adding these to our Spotify feed or anything like that, but we are adding them to YouTube, if I'm not mistaken. The videos go up on YouTube, and we'd love for you to share those with others. We like to encourage conversation, not just to speak our own opinions into the ether, because that, we are two people who have opinions that could be correct or not. That's not the point. We're looking to start a dialogue, start a conversation, and at the very least get people talking about something that they might not have considered before.
Disagree with us. We love it when people disagree with us.
Oh, please.
Yeah,
yeah,
100%.
absolutely. I mean, you'll probably be wrong, but that's okay. That's okay. You got to learn how to deal with that. So anyway, share it with others. Tell people about these two goobers who are dummies and clearly don't care about J.R.R. Tolkien's original vision.
Right.
But yeah, please share it with everybody you know right now.
And finally, guys, we want to let you know that Nerdy Gritty is part of Save Point Ministries, overall ministries. We are an organization that helps nerds find nerd-friendly churches. If you are in an area and you don't have a home church, or you are somebody who's been curious about church, but you're afraid of what they're going to think about the fact that you play D&D or Magic the Gathering or video games or whatever else, we help plug in you into churches that are just fine with these things or even love these things. We just helped connect a guy with a church whose worship leader is also a Twitch streamer. And so he's going to be right there, somebody at the door who's like, hey, what kind of stuff do you stream? What kind of games you play? Things like that. So that's our goal here. So if you are somebody who is interested in finding a church, head over to savepointministries.com and you can click the Find a Church button, and we will help you plug in somewhere. Once again, thank you all for listening, and always remember that saved games save lives.
Bye.
All right, I'm out.
Samesies.
Dang it, I got to remember to adjust my microphone. My microphone is adjusted just fine on the stream because you guys let me know that I was quiet at one point, but now it's way too loud in Audition. So I gotta remember to adjust that. Anyway, all right, chat.
Now that the stream is over.
Yeah. Aw, yeah, grip it and rip it, son. Your dank LaCroix?
No, it's an organic grapefruit Cascade Ice. Thank you very much.
That is the most Portland thing you've ever said.
It's a grapefruit.
This is an organic grapefruit soda. It's
No, it's a grapefruit
sparkling water.
sparkling water.
It's an organic grapefruit infused sparkling water. I can see unnecessary glasses frames and a low beanie growing on you right now.
That's such like a 2011
yeah
at this point. But yes, that is still what comes to mind for me.
Okay, let's come back here. Raintree says that he's willing to trade me. He has a full set of Run DMC Funko, and he wants to know if I will trade my car to him for it. The answer is no, yes. But I am kind of interested in a full Run DMC Funko.
That does sound pretty awesome.
Yeah. Fubadoo makes a good point. Nick Fury has been both a white dude and a black guy in various Marvel IPs. And I think, and you know what? Both of them are interesting characters that actually have their own kind of background. Like the white one is much more militaristic and because he ran a squad, Nick Fury and the Howling Pandos or whatever.
Howling Commandos, yeah.
And then the other one is much more espionage based and whatnot. So I think both of these characters are interesting and awesome, but I love that they're depicted racially different, and that means nothing to the characters, so it's fine. Yeah.
But fun fact, the Black Nick Fury was originally in the Ultimate Universe, where Miles Morales was also introduced, and he was in a it's the Ultimates, which is their version of the Avengers. They're having a conversation about who would depict them in a movie, and he straight up says,
Samuel L. Jackson.
Samuel L. Jackson, no questions asked, conversation over. This is far before the MCU, like a good 7 or 8 years before the MCU. And
well,
it was wonderful.
he at the time, like when his character was created, he was obviously based on Samuel L. Jackson.
He was very clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
River is talking about Mandalorian, and he says that per Favreau, Grogu was with Luke for 2 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was that long. I know that you didn't watch Book of Boba Fett, Fox, but you're okay. It was.
No, I mean,
fine.
regardless of the quality, I've just decided I'm not really watching the Star Wars anymore.
There is a lot of content out there to experience, and it's tough to like choose what you do and do want.
I'm sticking to Marvel.
Yeah,
even if
that's fair.
You know, it continues to be a little underwhelming, but I don't need to watch everything. I'm fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, I think that's going to be it for us. Thank you all for participating in the stream. Fox, thank you for being here with us. Unless you got anything else, Fox, you got anything else you want to say?
No, I'm good.
Cool. Then just a reminder, guys, one more time. If you are looking for a church, hang on. I have find a church. Boom. Nightbot doing work over there. Got a command in our chat here. Looking for a church, go ahead and click that link, follow it. We love that each and every one of you guys are here, but always remember that there is a church out there that would love it if you were there. We will see you guys next time. Bye.